So today we're going to be looking at a scenario where NATO goes to war with the entire world. This is kind of a follow-up video to one of my more recent videos, which was the USA versus the world. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. That shows me that you guys are enjoying these videos, and let's get right into it. So let's go back to the US versus world video and just say that NATO wasn't ignored. So we have Russia and China declaring war on the US. So immediately we have a map that looks like this. So it's basically World War III. We have North America and Europe versus Asia. But let's just say for some crazy reason, the entire world decides to help out Russia and China. Now, is this ever going to happen? No. But that's usually why I make these scenarios. It's fun to look at things that would probably never happen and kind of simulate them and see what could happen. Also, for the sake of balancing, I'm going to put the almost NATO members on the side of NATO. So that would be Bosnia and Herzegovina, Georgia, and Ukraine. So looking at statistics and comparing the two sides, they aren't like exactly equal. Of course, the red team is a little bit stronger, but when it comes to military, they aren't that far off. Population-wise, though, the red team has a lot more population than the blue team. When it comes to economics, we actually have the blue team and the red team being pretty equal in economics. But the main focus of my videos are looking at war, so obviously military is going to be a little bit more important. So, like I said, red team is a little bit stronger than the blue team. And yes, I did just unneutral Switzerland. So let's jump right into this. The main front, of course, is going to be in North America and Europe, because, that's where the only two fronts are. So the first thing to take place in this world, unfortunately, is the Italian occupation of San Marino. This is a tragedy for the oldest country in the world. Also, other micronations such as Vatican, Malta, Monaco, and Andorra aren't represented here, but we can assume that they're easily taking over right away. And eventually the same will be for Liechtenstein, as Germany and Italy are probably going to overwhelm Switzerland and Austria. Anyway, the second thing to happen in Europe is the blue team pushing down into Austria. They easily swoop down and take Vienna, and eventually Austria surrenders. Next up, we have the blue team's invasion of Switzerland. Now, this is going to be really difficult for the team, because the Alps are very hard to traverse. Eventually, though, they break through and manage to capitulate Switzerland. In North America, the US starts a push into Mexico, cutting off Baja California from Mexico. From there, they start to pushing across the Rio Grande River, and a full-scale invasion of Mexico is started. Over in the British Isles, Ireland manages to take out Northern Ireland, and in the Baltics, Russia starts a push inward. So taking a look real quick, here we have the world map so far. We have the blue team winning as of now. Now, the Russian claims in Ukraine and Georgia aren't counting towards gained land, because these are currently occupied in real life. But when looking at it, the blue team's already capitulated 2 countries, and the US is starting invasion of Mexico, so the blue team is winning as of now. Back over in Europe, the Balkans managed to wipe out Kosovo and Serbia, and a push into Sweden is started. Kaliningrad is taken, while Romania and Ukraine start pushing into Moldova and eventually wipe it out. So now Europe has a better front line. They don't have any other countries to worry about. So they're going to be pushing all of their troops over to the front lines in the Baltics, over here in Eastern Europe, and possibly down here in Asia Minor. As for Norway, it's kind of like a, I guess, a stalemate. Not really a stalemate, but no one can really gain any land because of Norway's mountains right here. And the same could be said for the Caucasus Mountain nations over here, because, this is a mountain range right up in here. Anyway, the US manages to completely take out Baja California and continues their push down south. They make a landing over here in the Yucatan Peninsula and manage to occupy a majority of the area. So this is what the US invasion of Mexico looks like so far. Obviously, we have lots of the US troops being sent down into Mexico and occupying lots of land. Which, if you think about it, is kind of good news for the red team, because they can just focus on Europe, wipe it out, and then focus on North America and possibly South America. Over in Ireland, the UK makes a landing in Northern Ireland and eventually pushes into Ireland and knocks it out. Also, I just realized that Malawi was a lake. I don't know why that was the case. I downloaded this world map off of Google, so that's probably why it was a lake. Back in Europe, Russia is starting their full-scale invasion of Ukraine as they push up through Crimea and start pushing over towards Kiev. Down south, the Middle East is starting to push into Turkey, taking their occupied land in Syria, and starting a push up north. Back in North America, Mexico City is wiped out, and slowly Mexico starts to capitulate as America starts gaining lots of land. Eventually, Mexico surrenders. From here, the US starts to push down into Guatemala and Belize and makes a front line in Central America. The US's next main goal is to take out the Caribbean and then start a push into South America from their current front line. Over in the Caucasus, Russia and other Middle Eastern countries countries managed to wipe out Georgia and continue a push into Turkey. In the Baltics, Finland and Russia managed to take out Estonia and Latvia and start a push into Lithuania before being stopped by European troops. Speaking of European troops, those troops start a push into Belarus and push towards Minsk. And from here we can see the real front line of the war. So starting in the Baltics, you can see that troops are lined up all along the Lithuanian-Polish border. Eventually that dips down into Belarus and then down into Ukraine and eventually ends off in Turkey. Here's a quick overview of the map. Back in North America, the USA makes it landing in Cuba and takes out Havana. From there, they take the Bahamas and take out all of Cuba. They then make a landing in Haiti and the Dominican Republic and take out all the Caribbean islands. Jamaica and other Caribbean nations aren't really represented here, but we're just going to say that the US currently has them occupied. From here, the US Army continues to push into Central America, taking out El Salvador and Honduras, eventually pushing into Nicaragua, down into Costa Rica, and eventually ending off at the Panama Canal. Over in Europe, Russia continues to make progress against Europe as they take Kiev, and start pushing around the Black Sea. The Baltics are eventually completely wiped out, and Kaliningrad is recaptured. Over in the Nordic area, countries continue to push into Sweden and eventually take out Stockholm, which leads to the collapse of Sweden. Luckily for Team Red though, Finland was starting to push into Sweden, so they now have a front line that looks like this. Also, northern Norway has been captured by Finland and Russia. We obviously have a pretty close war going on here. We have many countries being occupied by the blue team, but we also have the red team starting to push into many countries. Back in Turkey, the red team continues to push through, eventually starting to take many important cities in Turkey. The capital is eventually taken and Turkish troops fall back to Istanbul, which means the blue team has been completely kicked out of Asia. Back up north, the red team is starting to push into Eastern Europe and Central Europe, and eventually another front line is established, in which case it looks like this. Back in America, the US completely pushes out Central America from the war and starts a push into South America. In Iberia, Spain starts to push into Morocco, taking over their northern lands bordering the Mediterranean. From here, Spain and Portugal start a military push into Africa. Eventually, Operation Mediterranean is started. This operation's main goal is to occupy all of the land that surrounds the Mediterranean. By doing this, the blue team would be able to control trade and ships going throughout the Suez Canal, throughout Iberia, and maybe even the Black Sea. With help from all NATO members, the blue team starts a push into the Mediterranean area. They do pretty well and almost manage to completely capture the Mediterranean area, other than the Middle Eastern part. This plan did have consequences though, as the red team is now pushing further into Europe. This is even seen in America, as South America is pushing back the US. The good news for the blue team though is that without their coast, lots of these African countries are weakened. Now if you somehow are watching this video and don't know, there's a giant desert right here, and basically these countries are really weak without their coastal areas because that's where the non-desert areas are. So from here, the blue team easily manages to push into these countries. They even take the Egyptian capital and start pushing down the Nile. Eventually, the blue team pushes over through the Suez Canal and takes control of it, which is really good news for the blue team, as they now control trade going in and out of the Suez Canal. With other African troops probably not being able to push through the Saharan desert, the blue team easily manages to set up a front line here and can start sending troops elsewhere. Back in Europe, the blue team starts to push back the red team, and Istanbul is recaptured. So going ahead and pushing the fast forward button here, because I don't want to make it too repetitive, we have a world that looks like this. So starting in North America, we have the US occupying pretty much all of Central America, as they are starting to push into South America. We also have French Guiana being occupied by the red team. Now this map didn't show that earlier, but that was the case. Over in Europe, we have a pretty interesting situation here with the red team starting to push through the Nordic countries. The red team completely occupies the Baltics and Ukraine, as well as Georgia and Turkey and Bulgaria. And the red team is starting to push into Central and the Balkans of Europe. Whereas in Africa, the blue team's Mediterranean plan is starting to backfire, as the red team is starting to push up through Libya and up through Western Sahara. In the Middle East, we have the blue team starting to occupy a lot of the coastal areas. We have Israel, Palestine, and Lebanon knocked out. Now, if you don't know this already, the darkest color of that color, so let's just say the darkest blue color, is the country on that team. The little bit lighter version is a country that has surrendered and is being occupied by the blue team. And the lightest blue color is those countries occupying a part of a country, but that country has not surrendered yet. So over here we have Algeria having their northern coast occupied, but Algeria itself is still here and has not surrendered. The same is said for the red team, so we have the red team member, we have the red team surrender state, and we have the red team occupation. I probably should have said that earlier in the video, but I guess here it is now. So for this war, I'm pretty sure it would end in a stalemate. Now, looking at statistics, like I said, they're not too similar, but they're like close enough and similarity that this war would probably be a stalemate. Now, if you think something different, then that's perfectly fine. The point of these videos is to entertain and not to be 100% realistic. Now, of course, if we have entertainment, we also have to have some realism behind it. So that's why I brought in statistics. So let's go ahead and take a look at possible peace treaties. I'm going to do one for the blue team and one for the red team. So here is the peace treaty in the scenario that the blue team wins. Starting off in North America, we actually have a union between the United States and Canada. From here, they occupy about half of Mexico and the rest is a puppet. Cuba and Hispaniola are also incorporated into this new union under the US and Canadian control. And Venezuela becomes an American puppet. Over in Europe, we probably have the most interesting changes, with pretty much all of Europe, all of Europe under blue team control. So starting off, we have British control over Ireland. Up north, we have a Norway taking over pretty much all of the Nordic area. We have a Finnish puppet, which is probably controlled by Norway. We have a Baltic Union, which takes a big chunk out of Russia and Belarus. We have Poland gaining land. We have the partition of Austria between Czechia, Hungary, Slovenia, and Germany, and the partition of Switzerland between France, Germany, and Italy. In the Balkans, Serbia is like dismembered, and Ukraine gains some pretty sexy borders. The final thing in Europe is the Russian puppet, which is probably controlled by like a council of blue team members. Moving on down to Africa, we have Spain controlling northern Morocco and puppeting the rest. We have France controlling Algeria and a little bit of Tunisia. We have Italy controlling Libya and a little bit of Tunisia. We have Greece occupying a little bit of Libya and Egypt. And once again, we have that council occupying the, Egyptian Suez Canal area. Coming over to Asia, we have Georgia occupying a lot of the Caucasus area. We have Turkey occupying Armenia, Cyprus, Lebanon, and Syria. They also take a little bit of land from Iraq and Iran, and puppet Israel and Jordan. As for the Middle East, you can probably figure out who occupies these two countries right here. Also, the rest of Russia was split into two, so we have Central Russia and Eastern Russia. So that's what were to happen if the blue team were to win. Let's take a look at what happens when the red team wins. And here we have a red team victory scenario. So starting off in North America, we still have that US-Canadian Union, but that is mainly enforced because both countries are left pretty weak. We have Russia taking Alaska and Mexico getting a lot of their old Mexican Empire lands. And we also have a puppet down here in the south, which is probably controlled by some kind of red team council. In Europe, we have probably the most interesting changes. First off, we have Finland taking a little bit of Norway. And we have Sweden occupying all of Norway and Denmark. We have Russia occupying the Baltics, a little bit of Ukraine and Georgia. And we have Belarus occupying a little bit of Ukraine. Moldova is given land from Romania and Ukraine. Switzerland is starting to grow an empire. And Austria is given back a little bit of old land from their old Austrian empire. Down south, Serbia is starting to reunite Yugoslavia with almost every country under their control except for Croatia and Slovenia, which is going to be owned by Austria. We have a united Ireland. And we have Morocco pulling a reverse card on Spain and Portugal and taking a little bit of land out of Iberia. We also have Tunisia occupying Sardinia and Libya occupying Sicily. When it comes to puppets, we have Turkey, which is now a Russian puppet. We have Albania, which is a Yugoslav puppet. We have Italy, which is a council puppet. Also, just real quick, Corsica is under the control of Switzerland. And that does it for all the puppets. So that is going to do it for my NATO versus the world video. Now, like I said, this is for entertainment purposes, but it is meant to have some realism behind it. Like I said, I do believe this war would end in a stalemate, so the two peace treaties that you just saw technically aren't canon. Also, I just bumped my mic. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. That shows me that you're enjoying these videos, and I should continue putting them out there. This video is voted on by my Discord server. There's a link for that in the description, and I will see you in the next video.